Welcome everyone to Unchained Capital's continuing education webinar. You can catch these every single month, first Friday of the month. And they are designed to help empower you in your Bitcoin custody solution through education. My name is Justine Harper. I'm the VP of Continuing Education. And today I am joined by Tyler Campbell, our Technical Director of Concierge, and David Layton, our Director of Concierge. Today we are going over creating additional vaults within your Unchained account, but also doing a deep dive into derivation pathways, which allow us to have multiple vaults with the same keys. But before we get started into that, some of you may notice we are on a new platform, so just want to do a few housekeeping tasks here. Just want to let you guys all know that for any questions that you do have, we are going to have a live Q&A section at the end, as well as answering a few during the presentation. But those questions do need to go in the bottom right-hand side questions box that you can find right next to the chat box. So just make sure you have your questions in there so that we can see them. Also, as always, these will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel, but there will be a replay that starts after the conclusion of this session. So if you miss any part of it whatsoever, don't worry, you can come back to the same link and catch what you missed. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started on our session for today. So let's go over our topics that we will be covering. The first thing we're going to do is go over a review of our key terms. These are some basic terminologies that you're going to see a lot in our presentations as well as in the Bitcoin space. So just kind of a quick refresher for you. Then we're going to do a deep dive into derivation paths. What are those and what do they do? How to create additional vaults with the same keys that you're using possibly for your current vault. And then how to create additional vaults with different key quorums. Then, of course, we'll have our live Q&A section that we will be pulling questions from the audience and answering those here live. So make sure that you are asking those questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to cover our key terms.
All right. Thank you, Justine, and welcome everybody. So as always, we start these webinars off by going over key terms. So I'm going to cover about 7 of them. The first key term is always Bitcoin address. So Bitcoin addresses are where your Bitcoin lives. On the screen, we have an example of 2 different Bitcoin addresses. The first one on the left is a single signature. So that would be an address derived from or built from one public key. Multi-signature address is going to be an address built with 2 or more public keys. So Bitcoin is a completely public ledger. So all balances are tracked by the blockchain, which is about a 400 gigabyte database. And the entire world can see the balances of every address. And that's how we verify Bitcoin's supply cap of 21 million. Second term here, and I'm going to start an analogy, is a public key. So you can think of a public key as a lock to a given address. So public data, it's public data that's generated from a private key used to construct a single address. And hardware wallets like Trezor, Cold Card Ledger, is the ones that we work with, share public keys with wallet software. And you can think Unchained, Trezor.io to build addresses. Term number 3 is going to be private key. So if the public key is the lock, you can think of a private key as the key, and that is a key to spend from an address. So public keys are how you think about deposit Bitcoin to an address. Private keys are used to remove or withdraw Bitcoin from an address. It is a single key to an address, and hardware wallets know how to use the private key to sign transactions to spend Bitcoin. Every private key has a corresponding individual public key. So continuing the analogy, if the public key is the lock to a given address, the extended public key, or XPub, is the master lock. So an XPub can derive nearly infinite individual public keys, and then individual public keys derive the address. An XPub can be shared with wallet software or multisig coordinators to build a series of addresses, and that's what we refer to as a wallet. So there's more than one address within a wallet, and we'll kind of get into that later on as well. Finally, XPub, or a seed, which we're going to talk about next, can derive nearly infinite amount of XPubs. All right. So now we're on seed phrases. The last step of this analogy is the seed phrase can be thought of, or the seed can be thought of as a master key. So that is an example of a seed phrase at the bottom there. You may also hear these referred to as mnemonic phrases or mnemonic code words, backup seed, seed words, BIP39, recovery phrase. There's a lot of different ways to refer to a seed, but we, for the sake of consistency, always will refer to this as a seed phrase. So seed phrase, master key, is the most important piece of information for you to protect. Everything from private key, public key addresses within wallets are derived from the seed. So always secure this physically, meaning never take a picture of it, never let it touch the internet, type it into a notes app, anything like that. You always want a physical copy, whether that's on paper or on metal. It's absolutely critical to back these up physically. All right, that was seed. And the last term here is wallet configuration file. So we'll touch on this a little bit today also, but you can think of the wallet configuration file as the directions to your multi-signature address. So what we use it for, or what we have our clients use it for, is external recovery if ever needed. So a wallet configuration file is pictured down there. You have your derivation paths, which Tyler's going to touch on next. You have your key names, and then you have your extended public keys. It also has the address type, and which with Unchained, it's pay to script hash, and then the quorum, which is always going to be 2 of 3 at Unchained. So all that information would be needed if you ever wanted to gain access or rebuild your multi-signature wallet outside of Unchained. Yeah, so that is the review of key terms. And what I'm going to do next is hand it over to Tyler for a deep dive into derivation paths. So Tyler, as soon as you're ready, feel free to take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I've also been watching the chat. I see a lot of positive feedback about Livestorm as a new platform. So thank you again, everybody, for joining. I love the feedback on that as too. We're trying to make these webinars just as clean and as slick as possible. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. For derivation path deep dive. So what I want to do is first and foremost, give an overview of the derivation path. So it was shown a little bit when David was covering the wallet configuration file within the key terms. So kind of at a high level and thinking about the concept of what this webinar is about, it's about creating additional vaults within your Unchained account. So why are derivation paths even important? Well, a derivation path is kind of like, a file pathway taking you from your seed phrase, from that, that list of 12 or 24 words, ultimately all the way up to a given address within a certain wallet. Now, that's what a derivation path is, but why is it important? Why you see that M/45/0/0? Like, what does that even mean? Why is that important? Well, back in the day, didn't know the exact, year, maybe 2011, 2012. I could be wrong on that. But before there was the concept of a derivation path, which was introduced by BIP32, which is noted here in that kind of screenshot image on the left. BIP stands for Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. So Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 32 was authored by Peter Willey. And what it really allowed for was, hey, instead of every single Bitcoin address having its own private key that you need to manage, you can kind of think of it as like the situation on the right-hand side with all those keys. Instead of having to manage individual private keys all the time, what you could really do is just use one seed phrase, one mnemonic seed phrase, one set of 12 or 24 words in most cases, to keep track of all of your different addresses. So that's when the BIP32 path kind of came into play. And kind of breaking down that path, which we're going to do next on the very next slide, we're going to kind of see how we can get all the way from M, which is like your master private key, you can think about it as your seed, all the way down that derivation path to your different kind of public keys, and how all of that works in the platform and how it looks too. We're going to be able to kind of dive into that and actually do some interactive and live demos as well, showing you how you can create multiple vaults using the same keys, or multiple vaults using a different key, all within your Unchained account. And it does kind of fundamentally tie back to that derivation path. So we'll touch on this just a little bit later on. So in the left-hand side on that screenshot there, you see that BIP32 path for my key webinar. So it has that M4500. That's kind of the derivation path. That's what it looks like when you add a key to the Unchained platform. So we've created this really awesome graphic here on this page. And what I want to kind of go through, and I know this might be a lot coming at you right away, but that very first box where it says that key has the dark blue key, and then it says the Unchained platform, up there it says M4500. That's the derivation path for a key that's added to the Unchained platform, like new. Maybe you have a Trezor Model T, you added it to the platform, and you're going to see that. Now, as that key is added to more Unchained products, be it a vault or a loan, there's going to be an additional 0 tacked on to the end of that path. An additional depth is what we call it. So instead of just M4500, now that vault number 1, kind of that middle box on the left-hand side, it is now M45000, kind of as that first vault. Now that key is being used in a vault. Now, let's say I want to use that same key, but I just want to build a vault number 2. Well, in that instance, that derivation path for that key kind of automatically changes. Our platform iterates that last number, so you don't have to do anything manual there. And it's now M45001 as a part of that second vault. So when I turn it over to David in a minute, he's going to be able to kind of show you how that looks in the platform. That's kind of what's happening underneath the hood. Now, I know it's kind of in the weeds, and it is a little bit, crazy to look at these pathways and think about what's going on. But at the same time, it's really, really cool. You can use fundamentally your same key, your same seed phrase, and have it as a key in multiple vaults without you really needing to do anything extra or anything manual on your end. So before I kind of transition over and maybe talk through that example a little bit more, I want to focus in on the right-hand side of this image, that kind of zoomed in circle. So this is kind of a really nice way to break down the derivation path and each depth. So I was saying earlier, that's what we call them, is depth. So the M depth, kind of going from top to bottom, that M is like your master private key. You can think about that like your seed. That 45, that's typically called the purpose. What you can think about that as is like, multisig with an address that starts with a 3. So when a 45 is used there, that means that this is the derivation path for a multisig key where the address is going to start with a 3. That next 0, so that very first 0, so we have M45 and then 0, that's the coin level depth. So 0 is always going to be Bitcoin. That might be incremented up to 1 if you're working with testnet, for example, like testnet Bitcoin. Any other type of cryptocurrency is going to use another number there, and probably speaks volumes that I don't really know what any of those are. So 0 is going to be Bitcoin, and that's what we're going to kind of focus in on. The next 0, so that underneath coin, that is your account level depth. And this is actually really, really cool. So the account level depth is what allows you to use your same seed phrase, your same seed phrase that you set up on your device for multiple accounts. And where that might take place is maybe you have a personal vault within the Unchained platform, then maybe you have a business account or an IRA vault. That is the depth, that account level depth. That's where you go in and manually change up to a 1 or to a 2 or something different. If you want to use your same key just in a completely different account. We're going to be covering more on that in an upcoming webinar, kind of specifically on the IRA side of things. So that's just a little bit of a glimpse of what you might be seeing over there when it comes to a technical perspective. Underneath that account level depth, though, that's where we get into the 0 and the 1, the first vault and the second vault. So it's going to kind of map back over to the left-hand side. And that is kind of the last depth. And at Unchained, we're going to call that kind of the, maybe the product level depth, because that could be maybe you're using that key like is shown here for vaults 1 and 2. Maybe you're using that key for a loan. That would be another product. And that's where our platform is kind of cool. We just take that pathway for you and we iterate it automatically. So you can just keep building vaults using your same 2 keys that you have added to the platform. And again, I know that's like a lot of info coming at you right away, especially if you're not that familiar with derivation paths. So make sure to load up, some good questions. We definitely want to make sure to address those at the end. So when it comes to how to create additional vaults with the same keys, I'm going to kick it over to David in just a second so he can kind of go into the platform and show you how to do that. But before I do that, I'm going to give you one more visual that might help drive this home a little bit more. So what we have here is kind of another cool graphic. We have, in this instance, 3 vaults, vault number 1, number 2, and number 3, because our naming conventions are incredibly creative. We have the keys that are being used in these vaults down on bottom, and that white key, we can think about that as the Unchained key, right? So if you're looking along the top, we have that white Unchained key. That's going to be the Unchained key for every vault. But those 2 dark blue keys in the first vault, the derivation paths for those 2 keys, kind of going back to the image I was talking through earlier, it's going to be ending in a 0 at that product level depth. Then that second vault is going to be a 1. Third vault is going to be a 2. So these are the same 2 keys, the same 2 sets of 12 or 24 words that we're operating with, but these keys are now securing 3 different vaults. That's kind of cool. So There might be different reasons why you want to do this, why you want to create multiple vaults. Some clients just have one vault, some clients have multiple. But the fact that you can and that it's allowed for is really, really cool. And it's really a powerful aspect of these keys. Kind of what David was talking through earlier in our key terms, from just one set of 12 or 24 words, you can derive a nearly infinite amount of extended public keys, which can therefore generate a nearly infinite amount of individual public keys and therefore addresses. So it gets kind of crazy really quick. But to kind of drive this home from a platform perspective, I do want to kick it over to David to have him share his screen and kind of walk through the Unchained platform to show you, hey, with 2 keys, how do I create a second vault? What does that actually look like? Is there anything manual I need to do on my end aside from just clicking through that vault screen? So David, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. That was a great explanation and deep dive in derivation paths. So I will grab the screen here and kind of go through building a second vault using the same keys. So here I'm on the dashboard at Unchained Capital. I can come over here to keys and show you that I have 2 keys that have already been uploaded. So these are the XPub information that's been uploaded for Deschutes and Payette. And you can see there that they are connected to or were used to build one vault. So if I want to create a second vault using these same 2 keys, all I do is go over to vaults, I select new, and I follow the prompts to say what type of custody model, which 2 keys I'm going to use, and then I can build it. So client controlled, that's where I bring 2 keys, and Unchained is here as a backup or a third key. Default signers, I want sign on your own, so that I'm going to be the person who applies 2 signatures whenever I move Bitcoin out of the vault. And you see Unchained there as a backup. And give it a name. So to keep with the very creative naming, I'm going to name this one vault number 2. And we'll move forward and just pick the cosigners. So I can select pick a key and choose Deschutes and go next. Pick a key, Payette, and I go next. And then this right here, this is a third key that's going to be added to this 203 quorum, and that's provided by Unchained Capital. So if I click next here, I need to click this box to agree to the terms vault service agreement. The most important thing you're acknowledging every time you build a vault is that this is self-custody. So we are here in case something happens to one key and one seed. We can always provide a second signature. But if you lose access to both of those keys, you lose both of those seeds, there's no way to recover your Bitcoin. So it's very important that you understand a high level of personal responsibility. We're always here to help. A lot would need to go wrong, but this is what you're acknowledging here on this screen. All right, I'm going to choose select continue here. We did not use a cold card. If you do ever use a cold card, all you need to do is download a configuration file and train the cold card that it belongs to a multisig quorum. But I didn't use a cold card, so we're just going to go right into the vault here. So what happened in the background there is we cryptographically combined 3 of those XPubs, your 2 and ours, into a multi-signature wallet. This multisig wallet you can deposit into it by choosing deposit and show address. So this is the address that I would share with an exchange or Cash App, Strike, and I can deposit Bitcoin here. You can always confirm using a Trezor by selecting confirm on Trezor. But here's the thing that I want to point out after you build a second vault using your same keys is that you can go into the external spend info by clicking these 3 vertical dots. And this is something we refer to as the wallet configuration file. So I explained what the wallet config file was earlier, but now you're seeing in live time a brand new one that we just created. So if you hit show information, you can see that to what Tyler was just explaining before, if you see the derivation paths, that M45 number, this is going to be the 4th vault that I've built overall using Payette and the 4th building Deschutes. So that last number on the end there would have started at 0 for the first vault, and then 1, 2, and 3 being the 4th vault that I built using these. So you can build a almost unlimited amount of vaults using the same 2 public keys. And it's very important to note, though, every time you build a new vault, what you'll want to do is open up the external spend information and hit download so that if you ever needed to recover this multisig wallet or vault outside of Unchained, you can always do that using this file. And we have plenty of other resources showing Caravan and outside external recovery webinars and demos as well. So I will go ahead and exit out of that, and I can show my keys page now will have both of these keys connected to 2 vaults. So before it was just 1 vault, and now I have these 2 keys as part of a 203 quorum with 2 separate vaults. All right. So what I'm going to do now is toss this back over to Tyler. So that was building a vault or building a multi-sig quorum with 2 of the same keys. Now we're going to go over building a multi-sig wallet with 2 different keys. So Tyler, as soon as you're ready, go ahead and take the screen.
Awesome, cool. And I do want to give a little bit more context on this next question, and we can kind of talk through it with a visual. Then before I share my screen, I do want to make sure that we maybe pause for a question too. Just maybe a good one that was pulled up, and we can certainly address that before we formally hop into the larger Q&A at the end. But thank you, David. That was perfect. Really, creating additional vaults with the same keys is a pretty slick process. You can create, nearly unlimited amount of vaults with your same 2 keys, but also keeping in mind being practical about that as well. You don't need hundreds of vaults necessarily, but the fact that you can, we're not here to tell you what you explicitly can and cannot do if you do see fit to it. Just making sure to stay practical with it. This next kind of bullet point here for how to create additional vaults with different keys. So what we mean by this is you're not just constricted to using one set of keys in the Unchained platform. You don't just have to use, upload 2 keys. You might be able to, or you might get a new device or something like that, and you want to add that as a key to your account as well. You can certainly add more than just 1 key. Really cool thing that's kind of noted here in this graphic is you can use, maybe you have 3 keys in your account, and one of those 3 keys is actually being used in 2 different vaults. That could certainly be the case, as is the case here with kind of that overlapping Venn diagram. You see that yellow key. Well, that key is being used in vault number 1 and vault number 2. So if we think about the derivation paths for that key, probably for vault number 1, it's going to end in a 0. For vault number 2, it's going to end in a 1. And that's being kind of shared between both vaults. That's certainly something you can do. So you're not limited to only having 2 keys in your account. And examples could be maybe you have 2 keys that you've loaded into the platform and you've built a vault with those 2 keys. Then maybe you have, you want to take out a loan with Unchained as well. In kind of collaborative custody fashion, you provide a key to that loan address, and maybe you have a loan specific key. Maybe a new hardware device that we support has hit the market, and you maybe want to, generate a completely new seed phrase and, add a new key to your account. You can certainly do that as well. Maybe you have an alternative key holder scenario. Maybe there's a loved one in your life that, you've been talking about Bitcoin so much day in and day out for the past couple of years that they've just kind of capitulated. And now they're like, okay, fine, set me up with a private key. And you add a key to the platform for them to hold, and you kind of, handhold with them as to how to actually control, your own wealth. So alternative key holder scenarios could come into play. Just keeping in mind, if you do that, Unchained, we do work with the primary account holder for your account. So, if a loved one is holding a key and you're kind of teaching them the ropes, just know that, you do need support or assistance with your vault. We are going to be working with the primary account holder, which in most cases, or nearly all cases, would be you. So what I want to go ahead and do now is actually demo this from my perspective. So I'm going to share my screen just like David did. But before I do that, Justine, I want to pause here just to see if there's any awesome questions coming through the queue that we can address right away.
I think it's a great time to pause for a question. We have a lot of really good questions. I was trying to find something that was pretty relevant to what we're talking about now. We're going to go through all of them here at the end. Nathan had a great question. I'll go ahead and just read it out to you, Tyler. From a security perspective, when creating a new vault, is it a better practice to create a new vault with different keys than your first vault, or at least one different key than that vault? So now I know that you kind of went into this, but if you don't mind taking a few minutes to sort of explain to Nathan from a security perspective, if additional keys are needed, or if one vault, or I'm sorry, multiple vaults with the same keys is still secure.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good question. And, it is going to be something that's ultimately subjective to you and what you feel most comfortable and confident with. If you do have, you're taking security and storage of the elements of your setup, to the highest degree of what we recommend, 4 separate geographic locations. Using your same set of seed phrases and devices for multiple vaults. That is going to be that 4 things that you're going to have to keep secure. Then that's going to be a lot more manageable than all of a sudden having 6 or 8 elements to need to keep safe. So your surface area for you being your own worst enemy is kind of made a little bit larger by trying to overcomplicate it, maybe add a bunch of different keys to build vaults with. But that being said, if you consider yourself kind of a pro in that department, you have a really good lock on your operational security and what you're doing to keep your items safe, then you could use certainly more than one seed phrase, more than one device to build your vaults. Just kind of keeping in mind, again, complexity can be the enemy of security. You could be your own worst enemy. So keeping things simple with just 4 elements to manage. It is still incredibly secure with 2 of 3. The amount of stuff that David was mentioning earlier that can go wrong and you still have access to your funds, keeping that intact is absolutely fine. Beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that if somebody knows one of your public keys, they don't know your private key. So even building a second vault with your same 2 keys, it's not like you're giving much away about your private key or anything like that. It really just comes down to what do you have to manage in that scenario. And for me, at least personally, 4 elements is going to be a whole lot easier to manage than 8. But Justine or David, if you have any additional thoughts there, I would love to hear them.
I was just going to confirm exactly what you're saying. You hit it right on the head. 2 keys in a multi-sig, 2 of 3 with multiple vaults is extremely secure. When you add in additional keys, you add in complexity. So the last thing you want to do is make it overcomplicated where now you're like, I've got all of these things I have to store. I'm going to just put them all in the same drawer, right? We've just now, we failed, right? So keep it simple. I think keeping it simple is great. I use multisig, I use collaborative multisig, and most of my vaults include the same quorum of keys. So extremely secure. Great question though. Thank you for that. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Tyler, who's going to walk us through how we do that though. How do we have multiple vaults in our Unchained account with different keys? Tyler, take it from here.
Awesome. So you should be able to see my screen. Let me just get a verbal confirmation on that. Okay, perfect. Cool. So I have my, my Unchained account loaded up here, looking at the Bitcoin price, and I see that I have a webinar vault created down here. So I'm going to go click into my webinar vault, and I'm going to see that it's created, not securing any funds just yet, but it's secured by my 2 keys, webinar and Livestorm, kind of named after what we're doing today. If I click over to my keys though, what I'm going to see is that I just have 2 keys, and unlike David's, where both of his keys were a part of 2 vaults, right now both of my keys are just a part of 1 vault. So if I was to click into let's say Livestorm, for example, and press view, when you press view, you're going to be taken to like the landing page for your key. Shout out to Tom Hanzik, our other technical director. He's been using that phrase, and I really like it. Kind of the landing page for your key. You could rename your key, do your key checks, but you're also going to be seeing this BIP32 path. All of that is housed kind of in the landing page for your key. But with my 2 keys, well, maybe I do want to, going off of our example and what we've been talking about, maybe I want to build another vault, but maybe I just got a new cold card and I really want to add that as a key to the platform to get my feet underneath me with a cold card. I've been working with Trezors for a while, but I think I want to kind of go a little bit more advanced and set up my cold card and build a vault with it as well. Maybe I want to use my cold card and my webinar key to secure, my other vault. So the process for doing that is going to be, first and foremost, you want to upload a new key. So I'm going to go over to my keys page, ensure that I'm here, and I can either select plus new over here on the left-hand side, or I can select upload new key over here in the upper right. I'm going to select upload new key, and we can just give this key a name. We'll say maybe Minneapolis, since that's where I am right now, coming to you live from Minneapolis. Shout out to the Minneapolis Bitcoiners as well. So Minneapolis is going to be my key name. I'm going to press next. And now I'm going to choose cold card as my type of hardware wallet. When I do that, there's some additional steps for the cold card, and we have some pretty awesome guides on our Unchained blog. If you do find yourself in this exact scenario where maybe you have a cold card and you want to add it as a key, definitely suggest checking that out as well. But with a cold card, what you do is you export a file onto your micro SD card. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab that file from my micro SD card. If I was adding a Trezor or a Ledger here, it's a pretty straightforward process. You just connect to Trezor or connect to Ledger and have it plugged in and enter your PIN, but going a little bit more with the advanced route here. So I'm going to select upload the XPub here to open up my file explorer, possibly something that you can't see because I'm just sharing my kind of Google Chrome page, but I'm going to upload my XPub, my extended public key for my cold card. So I have my BIP32 path or my derivation path that we covered earlier. I have my public key here. I'm going to go ahead and press next. I'm going to see a nice review of my key name, my currency, my BIP32 path again, and I can select create here. Perfect. So now I've successfully created this key. I'm back on the landing page for this key. Now, if I click on keys over on the left-hand side, I'm going to now see that, okay, well, sweet, I have now this Minneapolis key, this third key here. But it has a big goose egg next to vaults because it's not a part of a vault yet, even though it's been added. So what I can go ahead and do now, following David's example from before, is I can just go over to my vaults and I'm going to build a new vault, but this time using my brand new key and then the webinar key as well. So when we're all done, the Minneapolis key should have a 1 next to vaults and the webinar is going to have a 2. So let's go ahead and do that. And I have my webinar vault here, but I want to create a new vault. So I can just go ahead and select plus new. I'm going to keep it as the client controlled where you hold 2 keys and Unchained holds 1. Default signers, when it comes time to move your Bitcoin, by default, I'm going to have my own 2 keys selected, but I know I can use Unchained as a backup at any time. And then for naming my vault, I have maybe my webinar vault. So we're going to name this one Livestorm Vault. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and pick my keys now, and I have 3 to choose from in this scenario. Definitely want to choose my cold card key, the new Minneapolis key that I had just added. I can press next, and then for my other key, I'm just going to, actually I named it Livestorm Vault, so might as well add the Livestorm key. That's going to help me keep it consistent. So I can go ahead and add Minneapolis and Livestorm here and press next. Get to this review screen that David was showing earlier as well. We have my 2 cosigners, my 2 keys, and the Unchained key kind of in gray is that backup. I can go ahead and agree to the vault service agreement. Great power comes great responsibility. I know that I'm using self-custody with my 2 keys. I can select create here. And in this instance, I won't go through the entire workflow, but in this instance, I am a cold card user. So what I would want to do is before continuing on, make sure to configure my cold card and go back and tell my cold card that it is now a part of a multisig. Because cold cards are air gapped, you don't plug them into your computer. You really need to use that micro SD card to go back and tell your cold card, hey, you're now a part of a multisig. So I would download a file here, and I'd follow these on-screen prompts to go into my cold card and import that configuration file. Once that's done, I'm just going to have this new Livestorm vault built with now my Livestorm key and my Minneapolis key. So if I go over to keys on the left-hand side at this point, I'm going to be able to see that this Livestorm key is now certainly a part of 2 vaults, but my Minneapolis key is a part of 1 vault and my webinar key is a part of 1 vault. So in that visual diagram scenario that we were looking at earlier, Livestorm here would be that golden yellow key in the middle of the Venn diagram, kind of showing that, okay, Livestorm is being used in 2 different vaults. If you click view on this Livestorm key, for example, again, kind of going back to that landing page for your key, I can actually see on this page that this key, Livestorm, is a part of 2 vaults. And it'll show me the balance for those vaults as well. So that's also kind of cool to note that you can do that when looking at each individual key. But awesome. So at this point, I am going to stop sharing my screen and take it back here. And at this point, I'm going to toss it over to Justine for our Q&A. We can kind of dive in and start addressing some of the awesome questions you guys have.
Absolutely. That was great. And yes, we have a ton of really good questions here. Before we got started on that, though, we are going to go through, I think we'll have time to go through most of them. We've got about 20 minutes left, but I just wanted to make sure that anybody who is here that wants to take part in next month's continuing education webinar has a chance to do so. Now, next month, we are having our webinar on April 1st. I remember we do these the first Friday of every month, and we will be covering Bitcoin transaction fees. So if you've never really understood Bitcoin transaction fees, don't quite understand how they're calculated, what they go to, and how best to send transactions or choose those fees, make sure you join us. You can actually click the button on the screen popping up now to register for that. So make sure you do so. It will be Tyler, myself, and Buck who will be going over his current or his old article about Bitcoin transaction fees. So we're going to be pulling from that a little bit. So if you have any interest in that, make sure you sign up. But with that, we want to actually jump into some questions. You guys have some incredible questions, and I appreciate that you guys have been voting them up. So we are going to go through and sort of select them by how many received the most votes. So those that received the most votes. So the first one, I'm going to go ahead and just read live, and then we'll all sort of kind of take turns. I can't think of the word there for a second. Take turns to doing these questions specifically. But I'm going to go ahead and read Brendan's first. I've heard it's recommended to always use a new receive address for security reasons, but I deposit into an Unchained vault. It's always the same address. How should I square these two things? That's a great question. So what Brendan's asking is that from a Bitcoin industry standard, for privacy purposes, it's good to have a new deposit address every time. What does that mean? It means when you go into deposit into a wallet or address, you get a deposit address, right? And that using a new one helps privacy, because when you've shared a deposit address with one entity and now you're using it to get, a deposit from another entity, those entities can kind of see that address, right? You've already shared it, so they can see the transactions going in and out of that address. So it's a good practice to use a new one. But Unchained Capital, current setup on your vault, you're going to see the same deposit address until you spend from that vault. Now, important to note that this will be changing quite quickly. So we will have some changes in the deposit addresses. Right now, if that's something that you want to have, if you're concerned about privacy, that you can actually sort of do this on your own. A DIY version of getting a new deposit address each time. How you would do that is you would just create a second vault, just like we showed you here, same keys, and you can use it as like a test vault. And then what you would do is anytime you want to refresh or get a new deposit address, you'll do a very small spend into that second vault. That is going to make the platform give you a new deposit address. And then, of course, your Bitcoin is still in your control and you're not sending it to inside any outside forces or addresses. At this time, it's not really a security measure, it's a privacy measure. So just keep that in mind. If you've already shared the XPub or information with the entity that you are depositing from, or you're doing it from your own personal wallet that maybe you hold the keys to, then just something to consider. Is it really adding any additional privacy for that? But just wanted to cover that one first from Brendan. Great question. And if you had any other follow-up questions, make sure and let us know. I wanted to turn it over to.
All right.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome.
No, please, Tyler, jump on.
Cool. I see a really good question from Charlie here. So I'm going to start that live answer. And you should be able to see this on the screen now. It says, if I move funds in and out of a vault and the address changed, do I need to re-download the derivation info or re-download that wallet configuration file? This is a really, really good question. So for each new vault you create, whether that be kind of within your personal account for personal vaults, or maybe you have an IRA vault as well, for each vault, you're going to want to make sure to download that wallet configuration file. It is static in that respect. You don't need to re-download it after you do transactions or deposits. And this also is like a really good segue into kind of this idea of a change address too. Kind of want to just talk about this for a quick second, because this question here from Charlie is really good. If I move funds in and out of a vault and the address changed. So whenever you spend from your vault, the very next time you go to deposit to your vault, you're going to notice that you're depositing to a new address. So that address is where we kind of bumped up all of your change, all of your remaining Bitcoin that's now on that new fresh address that has not been spent from before. So that's kind of an interesting thing just to maybe do some personal learning or research more about. I've written a Twitter thread on it in the past, and is something that we field a lot of questions on, is this idea of a change address. You might see it on your device if you're moving Bitcoin out of your vault. It's going to tell you on your device that a remaining amount of Bitcoin is going back to a different address, and it might look a little weird. That is your change address. That's going to be the very next address we provide for you within your vault. So kind of to answer the question directly, no, you don't need to re-download that derivation path info, that wallet configuration file after you spend, just after you create each new vault.
Awesome question there. All right. I had a question here that I thought David could answer. David, if you're up for it. Brendan had a question about where to store his configuration file.
Yeah, that's a very good
there?
question. Yeah, so let's see if I can find it in here, where to store. So there we go. So we like to get the question up on the screen there. So I was just trying to filter through and find it. So yeah, the wallet configuration file, you want to think of it as something that you should store in a way that you can get to from multiple devices. So that would mean, ideally, we suggest something like a password manager or encrypted cloud storage. So there's Bitwarden, LastPass, OnePass, things like that. And the reason why you want to store this digitally and behind some layer of encryption, but in cloud storage, it is so that no single device or USB or hard drive is going to be a potential single point of failure. So if you ever need this file, you can always go to Unchained, and how we showed you how to find it within your dashboard of a vault, and you can just download it fresh, bring it over to Caravan or Sparrow Spectre, and you can upload it and restore and have a new interface to interact with your multisig wallet. But you want to have this already saved somewhere, accessible from multiple devices, just in case you can't get onto Unchained for any reason. That's why we built this. That's why we have it behind every vault, is because the whole purpose of the file is to recover externally, but also to remove Unchained Capital as a single point of failure. If our website's ever down temporarily, if something ever was to happen to us, you can always use that file to interact with your Bitcoin. So encrypted cloud storage, password manager, those are ideally the two most secure and highest recommended ways of storing this file.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Real quick, before we jump into the next question, I wanted to highlight that we have a pop quiz in the polls section. So if you want to take part in the polls, we do have a few polls here. Pop quiz, new thing we're trying here. So make sure you take part in that. It's a very tough question. Will definitely let us know if we have educated you at all, or if you guys are just, we're failing terribly. So help us out here with the pop quiz. Perfect. And so with that, we do have a few pop quizzes. Take advantage of those. Are we allowed to vote? Yes, yeah. Tyler, please skew the numbers for us.
Awesome. Select I don't know.
Perfect. Select I don't know. Terrible, David, terrible. To get back into the questions, I just wanted to answer one from Brent really quickly. I think Tyler did, and David did a pretty good job of this earlier, but just because it's here, I want to make sure it does get answered specifically. What's the benefit of having more than one vault? Again, I do think this was answered, but this really depends on you. You don't need to have more than one vault unless you want to. So what I like to tell individuals is think of it as, why do some people have different checking accounts at the bank, right? Maybe it's because you want to keep your Bitcoin separated based on where you purchase it from. Maybe if you're one of those individuals selling Bitcoin, you want to keep it separated based on when you purchased it, because from a capital gain standpoint, if you hold it more than 12 months, there's less taxes involved. So maybe you want to organize it by year. I've seen a lot of individuals who actually set up sort of piggy banks for their kids, where each vault has a kid's name on it, and they just throw some sats in there. Now, obviously, this is still under the ownership of you, the vault owner, but it's a way that you can kind of separate your Bitcoin out in different ways. So it's definitely up to you of how you do it. It is something that you have the capability to do on the platform. Not completely necessary from a security standpoint, just allows you to organize your Bitcoin easily and have all of that in one easy to use dashboard itself. Great question though. All right. Tyler, do you see any questions there that you're just
I do.
Ready to go in?
There's a bunch of great questions here. So it's kind of like choice paralysis. I'm like, which one do I answer? There's one that just came through that I really, really like and really, really want to answer. So it's from Addison. What happens if you send more Bitcoin to your vault using the last deposit address you spent from? Does it still arrive, or is it lost forever? So this is a great question. And I think it ties also into another question from Brendan, who's asked a couple of good questions about, how does, or if I send Bitcoin to an address? If you're looking at the blockchain, does somebody know that it's a 2 of 3 multisig type of address? So these two questions are kind of intertwined. So to answer Addison's question, what happens if you send more Bitcoin to your vault using the last deposit address before you spend from your vault? So that is what's called, at least the terminology we use, is a previously used address. Maybe we call it an old address as well. I mean, it does happen from time to time, right? You may be using Swan, the DCA, into your vault, at maybe a monthly cadence or something, and you make a withdrawal, but you kind of forgot that you made a withdrawal, so you have a new deposit address, but Swan is still sending to that old address. In those instances, first and foremost, your Bitcoin is on an address that you hold the keys to, so it is not lost forever. It is just not showing at the moment in our platform. It's not going to be showing aesthetically your balance as it would correctly read if you were going to be depositing to that previously used address. But our engineering and product teams, huge shout out to them. We're making some good headway in that area. I think that is going to be changing here in the very near future. Your balance should be looking correct. What we want to still do, though, since it's not lost forever and it's still secure, something to be aware of, though, and this again ties into Brendan's question, if your Bitcoin is being deposited to an address that you have already spent from, that means that the redeem script for that address has been exposed to the blockchain. And what that means is your Bitcoin's still secure on that address, still secure by your keys, but it has been exposed now that it is a 2 of 3 multisig that address, was constructed from. So in general, sending Bitcoin to an address that you've already used, we just want to make sure, as a good best housekeeping practice, a good healthy vault is going to be making sure that all of your Bitcoin is on an address that has not been spent from yet. But to answer, again, Addison's question just really directly, it is not lost forever. It is still, secured by your 2 keys.
Awesome question. You guys have great questions. I was just getting lost in them just now reading through them. So really appreciate those. These question sections are really sort of the highlight of this session here. Mm-hmm. Really love that you guys have the option to come and ask these questions, but also good for us as well. We really enjoy the interaction. Real quick, I wanted to make sure that this one got answered that I lost as I was going through here. But I thought Jerry had a good question about asking about relying on BIP39 seed phrases generated by hardware wallets. So this is kind of a little bit more of an advanced question, but can you speak to why I should feel comfortable relying on BIP39 seed phrase that is generated by a hardware device? It's convenient to rely on the BIP39 word list, but isn't there also a compromise in the form of reduced entropy? Now, the great thing about Bitcoin is everything has trade-offs and everything has choices. You don't have to rely on the seed phrases that are being read to you from a hardware device. You have the option, like with a cold card, you can use dice, you can create your own. There's guides to do this. So definitely it's something that you can do. Now, with that being said, the way that these devices actually randomly select the words from the BIP39 list is an open source and very secure way. So it's something that you shouldn't have to trust in Bitcoin. You don't have to. But in a multi-sig situation as well, you're not actually relying on that one seed phrase. So there is no single point of failure in multi-sig. But just wanted to let Jerry know that if it's something that you wanted to do yourself, I don't recommend just choosing words because we as humans are terrible at randomizing things. But you can use dice, and there are guides that you can use to actually create your own as far as that goes. So definitely something you don't have to rely on the devices if you don't want to. From a general Unchained standpoint, they are very secure devices and they have been around quite a long time. And if you are eliminating single points of failure, the security aspect there is a little bit different. I just wanted to answer that for Jerry.
Nice.
All right. Now, it was a good one, right? I had one that I thought that might be good for David here. Now, it's a little bit further down in the list, so if you can't find it, I can kind of read it here for you. But it was essentially asking, does Unchained allow a client with an IRA to make multiple personal multi-sig vaults for personal use without charge? So I was thinking that maybe you could cover it. This is from Gregory, about how it works, that if you're an IRA client, maybe you have a vault set up for your IRA, how you can also have a personal vault as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So and this ties in perfect. So Gregory, great question. Here we go. I found it in there. ties in well with the derivation paths and kind of what Tyler was highlighting before, how to change those. So the cool thing about being an IRA client at Unchained is you have 2 keys. You've backed them up. You've done the work there to practice, operational security best practices. That's all good. What you can do is create a personal account. So it's going to be the same login, but you'll toggle between 2 profiles, and you can use those same devices, same keys, and change the derivation path. It'll be that 3rd number over the account number. And we can always help you walk through that to generate or upload brand new extended public keys or XPubs in your personal account that you can then use to build a personal vault. And there's no fees associated with a personal account, no charges, annual charges or otherwise. And you can use those same 2 keys to generate an unlimited amount of vaults. So recommendation, you can have one personal vault, 1 IRA vault, different public keys connected to those same private keys. But yeah, you can feel free to make a second one for organizational purposes, as many as you would like, really. So that's a great question. We'll go ahead and pop back into the questions. I actually saw one other one here that I wanted to take that I think is important to know. So Jeff Walker, good to see you in here, man. This is a great question. So those derivation paths are completely controlled automatically. Yes, there's not user mussing about required. So yes, first, the derivation paths using the same keys within your same account. You do not need to change that last number, the 4th one over from the private key, as Tyler was displaying on the screen as his first presentation. That's going to update automatically. So you don't need to do anything. You don't need to mess around with it. But I wanted to grab this question because it ties in nicely with the last question that we just answered. If you have 2 separate profiles, so business and personal, retirement, business, personal, you can change that 3rd number, that account number, from a 0 to a 1, a 0 to a 5, a 21, whatever number, and that would be the way that you are going to, how did you put it, muss around or muss about. So yes, you can change the derivation paths, but if you're just using the same XPubs to generate multiple vaults, you don't ever have to worry about changing it manually, but make sure that you download the wallet configuration file so you have that information stored if you ever need to rebuild the wallet in the future. All right.
Awesome question.
Great question.
Tyler, do you see any in there that you had on your plate to answer?
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
So many good ones.
I know
you guys are phenomenal with the questions.
There's some excellent ones, and Addison came in with a solid question before about depositing to a previously used address. So I'm going to answer another one of Addison's questions. So no upvotes, but I'll give it one because I think it's a great question. Is it possible to use the same multisig in 2 places at once? So like an Unchained interface, right, and then like Nunchuck, for example. So first of all, big fan of Nunchuck. Awesome with those, what any team in Bitcoin really is building out. That goes for Sparrow Wallet, that goes for Spectre, that goes for, all of these multi-sig coordinators that, that's where the heavy lifting is being done. The more interoperability we can introduce to the space, the better, right? We all kind of make each other stronger in that respect. So to answer this question, yes, it is possible to use your same multi-sig, kind of reconstruct it in 2 places at once. You're not going to break anything. You can use that wallet configuration file that was a part of our key terms. Now, with that being said, right now that interoperability is kind of still being fleshed out between different wallet coordinator software development teams, right? So our wallet configuration file that we generate from the Unchained platform, it's a .json or .json file. That right now is compatible with Caravan, which is our open source tool. Really, really awesome. That can be found at caravanmultisig.com. It is also compatible with Sparrow Wallet. Shout out to Craig Raw and the team at Sparrow Wallet, constantly shipping code, doing amazing stuff. Sparrow is great, and they do take our vault configuration file. And then you can manually rebuild your vault as well in like Electrum Wallet. Nunchuck is a multisig coordinator, and again, they're an awesome team, trying to be, in communication for saying, hey, we'd love our vault users to be able to rebuild their vaults over there in Nunchuck as well, just for that redundancy. Just so again, you don't have to trust Unchained to be around. That's kind of the name of the game, right? The more we allow our users and our clients to not have to trust us, in turn, that we hope to build more trust. So specifically, Addison, Nunchuck, not at the moment, but I wouldn't say it's too far away. But it's an excellent question. And yes, for that redundancy, it is good practice too. If you do feel you got the technical chops, you just want to try it out, we have some awesome video content as well that shows you how to do that. So I did a webinar with Justine a couple months ago now, maybe even about 6 months ago, showing how you can take that wallet configuration file and load it up into Caravan, Sparrow, and Electrum.
Awesome. Yeah, it feels like an eternity ago that we did that webinar. And I did share the link earlier. I'll share it in just a few minutes. If you guys miss any of our webinars, you can always catch them on our YouTube channel, our Unchained YouTube channel. We have a lot of really great resources there. So make sure you're checking out the content there, as well as our Unchained blog. There has been some fire content coming out on that. So if you are not subscribed to the newsletter or checking out that blog, make sure you do. All signal indeed. So I do see one question about beneficiaries for vaults that I was just going to touch on real quick. And then I will share Jeff's article in the chat in just a minute. But Brendan asked, is there a timeline for adding a beneficiary to vaults? So this is kind of a tricky subject because in Bitcoin, whoever holds the keys can move the Bitcoin, right? Your family members don't need our permission to move your Bitcoin if you've left it to them. But what happens if somebody doesn't understand Bitcoin, doesn't understand how to use keys, they don't understand seed phrases? How does that work? Well, there is sort of a question here of title versus possession. So when it comes to beneficiaries or inheritance planning, Jeff and Drew, we have an upcoming webinar on this in the Retirement and Inheritance series. So make sure that you are looking out for those as well. They're the third Wednesday of every month. And I think that one is planned for April or May. I'll have to double check. I'll put the schedule up in just a few minutes. But he will be touching on that specifically of how to build an inheritance plan. But let's talk about what it looks like right now with Unchained Capital. You have a vault. You are the owner of this vault. If you have passed and you have legal documents showing who is now the new owner of your assets, they can bring that information, and it varies state by state. So make sure you're looking at this article I'm about to post in the chat on that. But it does vary state by state what that would be. But they would come to us and they need one key. Whether that looks like a seed phrase or a hardware device or something to that nature, they need something to bring so that we can use our one key and then help them migrate things over. We can teach them how to use devices. We can teach them how to transact. We can do all of that, but they have to have at least one key. Because remember, Unchained is not holding your Bitcoin. You can't set a beneficiary on your account and us just turn it over to them because we don't hold your Bitcoin. You hold your Bitcoin. We're just helping you secure it as a third-party backup, as well as, of course, the technical support that comes along with it. So as of right now, they would need one piece of information and legal documentation. And if you have a trust account with us, you can set up trustees. So that may be a different way to go about it as well. As maybe you have a living trust, you have trustees assigned to it. Great, set up an account with that. And they would have access in the account as well. So I hope that answers the question, Brendan. I'm going to link in this article for more information. But yeah, great question overall. All right. David, did you see any other questions there that you wanted to answer real quick?
Oops, I'm muted. Let's see if we can grab one that has not been addressed with higher upvotes. Yeah, so this is actually a great one. I think maybe Tyler can help me answer this, but Brendan had a lot of great questions that came through today. Brendan asks, can someone in a blockchain explorer tell from my vault address that it is a 2 of 3 multisig? So there are identifying factors within looking at a specific address that you can tell whether it's single sig or multisig. Getting deeper and more technical than that, I would probably say, Tyler, would you be able to add some color to this? Can you see specifically that it is a 2 of 3 or a 3 of 5 or those types of specifics from the address itself?
So once the address has been spent from, you can. So once an address has been spent from, that's when the redeem script is exposed to the blockchain, which then signals, how that address was constructed. But a brand new, fresh address that has not been spent from, you can't tell. So different block explorers display this a little bit differently. Like mempool.space. If you actually look at the transactions list within a block, they have this little like yellow tag. It kind of stands out for a given address, that a certain address was a multisig 2 of 3 or a multisig 3 of 4. And that's all being pulled because that address is now spent from. But if the address is not spent from, then you can't. So that's why, kind of going back to, I believe it was Addison's question from earlier, nothing is wrong security-wise if you do spend Bitcoin back to a previously used address, but you're going to want to make sure to bump that up to an address that has not been spent from before.
Awesome. That's why I pulled Tyler into that one. That was a much better answer than I could have given. Good job.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
And I just dropped the link to mempool.space into the chat for everyone if anyone wants to take a look at that. It's an awesome block explorer that shows current fee rates as well. So a tool that we use a lot.
All right. We are getting down to the hour. I think we have time for maybe one more question before we have to wrap it up. This is a question that I thought was good and sort of definitely is something that comes up often. Jeremy is asking a question, and maybe I can get the gents here to help me on this as I sort of wrap up from a production standpoint as well. But Jeremy is asking, newbie question, warning, can't we just send stacks to one of our vaults without transaction fees similar to IRA? I think what Jeremy is talking about is when you set up an IRA account with Unchained Capital and you do a transfer, you take your lump sum that was in your IRA account, right? And we purchase Bitcoin for you. There is a fee involved in that. And then we move it into your vault. So when you're actually just sending stacking sats, right, to your vault, what's the best way to do this? So maybe Tyler, if you don't mind, I think, and Jeremy can correct me in chat, I think he may be asking sort of what's the best way to sort of stack sats into the vault? What about DCA? But also, how is this different than what I'm actually doing from moving my funds to the IRA? So if you don't mind touching on kind of the difference of that, and then also just, the best way to sort of continue stacking, and when's the best time to move it into your multi-sig versus on the exchange itself?
Yeah, good question. I'll try to answer this, the way that I'm thinking about it is, because with the IRA, we conduct the trade, we're partnering with Solera, we deposit the Bitcoin into your vault. There's kind of that fleshed out process, especially from a legal perspective. We want to make sure everything's all set from the IRA structure. When it comes to moving your stack into your vault from your given exchange or from your, maybe a set of private keys that you currently operate on, and you want to maybe move from single signature over to multi-sig, you are going to be paying the transaction fees just for the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, different exchanges kind of have a different cadence here with their fees. Some, they have different fee schedules. Maybe they tack on an additional withdrawal fee on top of it. But in general, it's going to be, paying fees at a very minimum to the miners on the Bitcoin network. Now, when it comes to sending your stack over to your vault, you do kind of want to be a little bit mindful about how you do that, right? I mentioned Swan a little bit earlier, or a lot of folks are into mining now, right? Home mining is kind of taken off a little bit, so maybe it might seem like a great idea to just mine right to your multi-sig. Not only are you getting those mining sats, but you're securing them right away with 2 of 3 multi-sig. With that comes a little bit of a deeper question about forming a strong UTXO strategy, and maybe making sure that you're not DCAing or mining right into your vault every single day or every single week, because that can become a lot of UTXOs sitting on your address. And that's kind of a deeper discussion. We do have another webinar out there on that very same topic. So in general, I would recommend, if you're going to be consistently sending to your vault, maybe once a month, or once it builds up to an amount that you feel, is kind of you're confident in, you can send that over to your vault. But yeah, would be happy to kind of take that offline as well.
Nice.
Awesome. All right. And as we wrap up, I did just want to let anybody know, if you happen to be here and you're not a current Unchained client and you kind of think some of this sounds interesting and want some more information about our products or services, you're always able to schedule a free consultation. You can click the link on the screen now with our team, and they can answer those questions for you. I think most of you guys are current Unchained clients, but just wanted to make sure that you had that option as well. With that, we do need to wrap it up for the day, but do want to remind everyone that these webinars happen every single month. Our continuing education webinars are designed to help empower you in your Bitcoin custody solutions. So make sure you're joining us every single Friday, first Friday of the month, to kind of go over specific things that maybe you learned in the beginning that you've forgotten, or deep dive into certain aspects that maybe you have a high level understanding of, or maybe you've heard of, but you really want to understand them on a deep level. So make sure you're joining us every month for that. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat again to our YouTube channel. If you've missed any past webinars and want to view them, go ahead and check there. All of these are recorded. This one will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel next week. But if you've joined late, there's a really great aspect with this new platform. If you join late and you're like, hey, I missed the first 15 minutes, stay on. Just stay here for a few minutes. And what will happen is a replay will start. And you can come back to this link at any point and watch the replay. So with that being said, I just want to thank everybody for joining. Unchained is here to help empower you with your Bitcoin custody and help you become sovereign in your financial wealth. If we didn't get to your questions, do apologize. We have some future plans for fireside chat sessions, which is just all questions the whole time. So make sure you come back. Really excited to have you guys here. Thank you, Tyler and David, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.